Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm your host, Nathan Staples, and joining me this week are French football writer Mohamed Ali and GFFN writers Eric Devin and Tom Scholes. Buying clubs seems to be very in vogue at the moment in Liga, and with a few new owners potentially on the horizon, will they bring riches or regret to their respective teams? We talk about that and all of the action from the weekend after the latest headlines. Ligue 1 returned from its international break with two top-of-the-table clashes on Friday evening. Toulouse came from behind to beat Monaco 3-1, Martin Braithwaite notching a brace and an assist, while Lyon were reduced to 10 men after Nabil Fekir's dismissal in the first half and fell to unbeaten Nice 2-0. Saturday's early match saw an uneven PSG win at Nancy 2-1, goals from Lucas and Edinson Cavani, enough for the capital side to move into second place. In the multiplex, Montpellier again scored 3, with Casimir Ninga grabbing 2 of the goals, but were only able to hold on for a 3-2 win at home to Caen. Guingamp held off Lille 1-0 on that multiplex as well, while Nantes won a Breton derby away at Lorient 3-2. Angers continued their strong run of recent form, moving into the top half of the table as Farama Diédhiou's brace saw them defeat hosts Bastia 2-1. On Sunday, the early match saw Rennes held at home by Bordeaux 1-0, while Saint-Etienne needed a stoppage time penalty from Nolan Roux to earn the same result at home to Dijon. In the weekend's final match, Bafétimbi Gomis scored the match's only goal as Marseille defeated Metz 1-0 in the final match of the Louis Dreyfus era. In Ligue 2, Brest and Amiens both won to stay in the automatic promotion places, while Lens can go third with a win this evening against Sochaux. And that's all for your news, but remember, for all the latest, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this week with the takeover of Marseille that was confirmed a couple of hours ago. The Louis Dreyfus reign has ended and Frank McCourt is the new owner of l'OM. Mo, give us your thoughts on the move.
Well, first of all, given that we've kind of always been moving to this point ever since the August announcement, there's no, real surprise. Everything's kind of already been spoken about. But it just feels a little bit surreal that it's actually here. As of today, Marseille has a new owner. Many of us supporters, have not known an OM without the Louis Dreyfus family. So it's obviously an exciting time for the club, for its supporters as well. But now the question focuses on how will Frank McCourt kind of transform the club. It's a challenging time. He's got a bulging in tray full of immediate decisions he needs to take as well. The team it's in need of reconstruction. So is the management team. The fans have deserted the stadium. You only need to look at yesterday's game against Metz to just know how much of a challenge he has on his hands. But where today's announcement is concerned, it's a good thing that the sale is now official. Everything has been sorted. It's been a long time coming, this official announcement. And now, just look to the future and just hope that it's the first step of a new chapter in the club's history.
Before we look ahead, really, you wrote a great article on this earlier today, Mo, about the Louis Dreyfus era, and I really wanted to very quickly look back and how would you summarise their era ahead of Marseille and how it sort of turned out in the end?
Right. Well, it's quite sad considering I think it's quite sad that for particularly where Robert Louis Dreyfus was concerned, he did invest a lot. He like he once famously said, Marseille frustrates him so much, but it is his passion. He loves the club, and he knew that he's not going to win any money. He's not going to make any money rather while investing in the club, and he invested so much. And it's a bit unfortunate that for all of his efforts, he never got to live to see a trophy. And as soon as his widow took over, Marseille did actually win the league title in his first season. And I do credit him with kind of reviving Marseille around. We all know the stories of Marseille in the late '90s, where after the match fixing scandal, how down at the hill that they were, and how he revived Marseille from about 2002 to 2000 to well into 2012, 2008. For a whole decade, Marseille were a stable club in the Champions League in Europe for consecutive seasons, and there were exploits along the way as well. But most of all, this is not a club that was as volatile as it had been in history. This is a club, okay, Lyon did kind of have a stranglehold on French football, but they did always finish second or third, get into the Champions League quarterfinals. They, 2 European finals just after being relegated, just after recovering from relegation. See, it's a really good effort, and we did have the era of Didier Deschamps as well, and it's been a successful road. It's just a bit of a shame that the 20-year kind of association from Robert Louis Dreyfus to his wife has ended on such a sour note. It's a bit of a the kind of legacy, how really meek it's turned out over the last 2 years. It's pretty sad, and at the end of the day, you kind of you want to focus on the previous highs rather than the recent lows where the era is concerned. That's why it's very easy to say that thank God Marguerite Louis Dreyfus is gone. It's been really poor 2 years, but considering, if you look at the greater picture, there has been more successes than lows. But again, it's just we wouldn't be here today if I personally don't think Marseille would be in the position they were today if Marguerite didn't kind of develop this nonchalance towards the club, and if she maybe made more of an effort to preserve Robert's legacy. She did say, it's not my cup of tea, football, to be honest. I'm just I'm the trustee of his fortune, and I've got to do what's best for my family, and try throwing money at a football team, an underperforming football team that hemorrhages money in an era of football where clubs are dominated by investment funds and shady countries as well. It's not for me, and that's kind of why we're here today. But I'd say overall the era of Louis Dreyfus we've seen more successes than lows, really.
And that, at least it's a net positive result in the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
Eric, we've talked about Frank McCourt before and the worries that stem from his issues at the LA Dodgers, but he's been saying the right kind of things, at least at the moment. Do you think he could brush that aside and become a positive owner for Marseille and move them forward? Or is he someone that the fans should still maybe take caution with for the time being?
I think so. I think if we look at Marseille's success, at least in the recent past, say the past 4 or 5 years, a lot of that was built upon canny buys from around Ligue 1, like Thauvin, Payet, Mboula, Mario Lemina, Benjamin Mendy, or even Batshuayi coming from Belgium. There was money being spent on players, but it was being spent in a way sort of similar to what Monaco are doing now, to buy players for lower amounts of money, say 10 million euro or less, and then to sell them on for a profit will still maintain the sustainability of the team. And if McCourt can get in place the right scouting network to make that successful, because let's face it, there have also been moves that Marseille have made in the recent past that haven't exactly worked out so well. The jury's still out on Doria, but we can safely say Lucas Ocampos perhaps didn't work out. So with that in mind, I think that there is a template readily available in the form of the Monaco model, if you will, to buy players from around Ligue 1 and sell them on, while keeping the team competitive and attractive at the very high end without spending a whole lot of money. I mean, we look at what Rybolovlev had done at Monaco. He went through his divorce and realized, okay, I can't make this team world class. There's no Falcao, there's no James, there's no Coutinho, but I can still bring in the likes of a Benjamin Mendy, a Djibril Sidibe, and make this team play attractive football and turn these players on for a bigger fee. So, that being said, the question is, will Marseille's fans mind if that is the case, if Marseille become this sort of a turnstile club? And if they're all right with that, I mean, I think that it would be really unrealistic for any fan of a Ligue 1 team, and myself included as a Lyon fan, to think that anything's going to break PSG's hegemony in the near future. So if Marseille are willing to look at that as a model and to grow in that way, I think that they can be back at or near the top of Ligue 1. Nice have done a similar thing with the younger players they brought in recently: Walter, Lusamba, Jean-Michel Seri, Ricardo Pereira. So there's definitely a way to look at that. The question is, I think that there needs to be an improvement in Marseille's scouting system and their hierarchy in that regard for that to come off well. But I think that there is definitely a path back, if not to the very top of Ligue 1, at least to be competing for those European places, as they rightfully should be.
Well, the first issue that Frank McCourt may have to kind of address is, as Mo's mentioned, those fans not really filling out the velodrome as they had in the past. Tom, how does he get those fans come back into the stadium? Is it finding the right manager in charge, or is it finding an exciting route to football, or is it just making them a more stable club again?
I think it's a combination of all three. Of course, it's imperative for Marseille now to get a manager that can stabilise the team and can work on building a squad for the future, but also bringing a brand of football that excites the fans and brings the fans back and brings that intimidating atmosphere week in, week out, not just for the big clashes. Of course, the brand of football comes with the boss, but fans will come in their droves if the football's exciting, if the players are exciting, and more importantly, if the team's winning. If the team's winning, then everybody's happy. But if they're winning in style, that's a bonus.
Yeah, and that's what the defining factor can really be. But we briefly touched on it, Mo, about Franck Passy and his interim status, really. De Marseille, is that the first job really for Frank McCourt to identify a manager who can take this team forward, or at least push them in the right kind of direction?
Absolutely. I think there's no secret that Franck Passy is more of a placeholder at the moment. And as soon as the club identify kind of the sort of profile they want in the next coach, he'll be the first person to leave. But it's a bit difficult to get a coach kind of mid-season, and then how much time do you afford him? If this was July, for example, it'd be a no-brainer that Franck Passy would have gone maybe within weeks. But now that we're well underway in the league season as well, and how many coaches will be comfortable kind of taking a team in construction about a quarter of the way through the season? Not many. There's been a couple of people rumored, but I think with Franck Passy, he knows that he's got time on side. I think particularly until January. I think I'll be very surprised if Marseille do install a first team manager by January. But I think he the way that he's coaching as well is kind of not making any drastic calls. Is kind of just keeping the team warm. Even to say the least, that he's not really imposing his sort of identity on the club, because time's running out for him as well, with the new owner now being confirmed.
And the real question, Eric, is maybe could this unsettle a team that seems to be at least slowly improving and finding their feet in Ligue 1 after a shaky start?
I don't think so. I think that the progress, if you can call it that, the progress that Marseille have made in recent weeks, I think seems to be down to the players willing to put in the work necessary to succeed. I mean, I think we need to look at Florian Thauvin in particular. He finally seems a little bit chastened by his move and subsequent failure at Newcastle, and seems to be working a lot harder this season. Remy Cabella, likewise. Bafétimbi Gomis, the same thing. He's always a player who I've enjoyed watching, can score. And I think that up front, there's good signs there. And I think at the risk of being unsettled, no, I don't think so. I think that this is a group of players who, whatever success Marseille achieved this season, is going to come down to their willingness to work. And I don't think that the managerial situation will upset them. I mean, let's face it. I think Gomis is on loan, and NG as well. Thauvin and Cabella to they're still young enough. I think that they'll want to move to different clubs in the future, and we'll see this as an opportunity to showcase themselves, to not only display individual skills they have in the past, but also to show that they can fit into a team template, which is something which they both have struggled in the past. And I think for those two to continue their career, to reach the heights that that had been perhaps hoped for them, say 3 or 4 years ago, I think this season thus far demonstrated an understanding of what it takes to be a successful football player beyond just merely having talent. And I think that's readily apparent, and I don't think the managerial situation will affect. I think what's a frankly pretty hungry group of players.
Yeah, and the hope is that some of those Lion signings can now turn into permanent ones and really create a stable squad. But to bookend this chat about Marseille, I wanted to put the power in all of your hands. So all of you are now the owners of the biggest club in France. You all get one major decision to make to improve the club. And no, it can't be splash all of the money to buy every world-class player on the planet, but a more practical move that at least gives the club some stability moving forward. So I'll start with you, Mo. What would be the one thing you would like to see change?
It would have to be the hierarchy. I mean, I think what Marseille have been lacking for about the last however long it's been, it's a competent management, a clearly defined organizational chart, competent sporting director, a general manager, director of football, wherever these roles are, it needs to be clearly defined and people held to account. That's what Marseille have been lacking, and that's what other teams, that's what gives you your Lyons and your, Bayer Leverkusens and other teams in Europe that are well run, because they've got individuals within the club whose roles are clearly defined. In Marseille, it's been more or less a shambles. How much power does the president have? Over the last 5 years, Vincent de Bruyne has been able to do whatever he wants at Marseille, being stopped by nobody. He kind of tells the scouts, what sort of player he wants, despite not knowing really much about football. And across Europe, that's what, for clubs with little amounts of budget. Look how well Sevilla and Porto have done in recent years. Without a massive budget in terms of like the revenue the club makes and the amount of money they get to work with each year, except that with a really, really good hierarchy and a good scouting department and good organization around the club, what you can really do wonders, identifying players and playing the right way with not a massive budget. Now, this could be achieved at Marseille, especially if Frank McCourt, like I said before, the previous time I was saying, Marseille, really the situation they're in at the moment is only because Marguerite Louis-Dreyfus kind of switched off the tap when it comes to money. She refused to cover the deficit, and that's why you've got Dimitri Payet, Steve Mandanda, and Koulibaly and the likes leaving. But if Marseille do manage to run themselves well, and Frank McCourt is able to, inject 30 million, 40 million, 50 million a year, there's no telling, kind of what Marseille will be able to do. They can have that push into the Champions League, and Champions League money will self-sustain them. And then, you've got spare investment to kind of work around, building either a really good youth team, developing a worldwide scouting network, or whatever that may be. But it all starts with internal recruitment, and it starts with overhauling the internal employees of the club.
Eric, what would you do if you were in charge?
I think I would agree generally with what Mo said, but I would say more specifically make this a team based around youth. And we look at the success that Lyon and Nice in particular, and even Monaco to some extent, well, not as many of those players are as academy products as the former two. I think that there's something to be said for that. This policy of bringing in these more experienced players, I'm thinking the likes of Sakai, Hubachan, Rod Fanny. There's a little, William Banker. The players that have arrived this season, I think, are perhaps a little bit standing in the way of some of the younger and more promising players that are on Marseille's books. Perhaps the likes of Esperania, Baptiste Alloué, players like this, and that to me is a little bit frustrating to see these younger players not be given a chance to develop, or even the likes of a Javier Manquillo. I know he's a lone player, but why he was returned to Atletico Madrid to bring in Sakai, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I think that there needs to be a mandate that's overarching and guides the team's policy as a whole. And given the success that teams in France have had, I mean, Lille in the past had a similar thing with the likes of Debuchy, Cabaye, Eden Hazard, and a policy that aggressively promotes youth, if well executed, can be done in a manner that's inexpensive and not at the success, not at the expensive success of the first team.
And finally, Tom, what would your mandate be?
I think it's a combination again of what Eric and Mo have said. They've got to build a team around youth players that can be here for a number of years. They also need to tie them players down so they don't have incidents where some of the key players that the fans love, such as a Mandanda, don't go on a free. Also, with some of the youth players, they'll want to play for the club. They'll feel the passion of the fans. They'll be more energized to play than some players in the past. But more importantly, it's the hierarchy. They need to sort out what's going on top. They need to become a well-run club that can push for European places and even honours domestically. And who knows, they might even go on a Europa League run one of these days. They need a system that suits the club, runs the club well, and isn't an absolute shambles like it is now.
And that's at least all we can hope for from a new owner. Thanks again, Mo, for joining us this evening. It's always great to have you on, and hopefully, again, it will be more positive news about Marseille than it has been.
Hopefully so.
Thank you for joining
Cheers,
us.
Mo.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
We now turn our attention to the Friday night fixture, or the early Friday night fixture, and Toulouse fans will want to play the early kickoff every single weekend. They dispatched another big team at home, taking down Monaco in a 3-1 win, and that lifts them to fourth position, temporarily third above PSG for a time. But Tom, what has been the secret behind their success so far this season?
It's been amazing. Personally, I've really enjoyed watching Toulouse this year, seeing how well they've come on. I feel Pascal Dupraz has done an absolutely amazing job with this team. You look at how they were at the start of last season, they were a little bit trepidatious, a little bit cautious. They didn't, I'll attempt to say they didn't have the belief that they could push on. This season, they've taken the momentum they had from staying up by the skin of their teeth last year, and they've pushed it on to the next level. Players that are coming out of their shells, with Martin Braithwaite, a player that I've followed personally since his days in Denmark. He's come out of his skin, maybe due to the sale of Brett Ben Yedder. He's been allowed to be the number one striker, and he's benefiting from it. But I think an emphasis, obviously not a whole lot of young players, but people like Alban Lafont in goal, absolutely superb. And for someone of his age, it's easy to compare him to Gianluigi Donnarumma over at Milan, but it's something similar where he's come in, he's got an air of confidence about him, and he knows he's a good goalkeeper. I think that they're picking up big victories against big opposition. You know, they beat PSG and Monaco, but there's this air. They have this air of invincibility around them, and of course, you know, they will slip up every now and again. But at this moment in time, they have the belief and the confidence that they can take on any team and give them a good run for their money.
And that's the strange thing about the game on Friday, Eric. That they went a goal behind very early on, but that only really seemed to galvanise them, if anything, and that shows the real spirit that this team has at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we look at this 3-1 scoreline, and it easily could have been more. I mean, Braithwaite had a couple of chances before he did score in the first half. I think that Toulouse thoroughly dominated the first half after going behind, and I believe there's a chance for Thiago Silva as well. But yeah, this team, I think, has shown not only a resilience to come back, but also a flexibility. We've seen in recent weeks, due to the suspension of Olazabal, and the team adapt to a 4-2-3-1 with Braithwaite on his own, Trejo coming centrally, and Jimmy Durmaz and Silla switching wings from left to right. and the team looks a lot more complete. You've got a back four that have been consistent with Yago Mumbanje, Diop, and Christophe Julien, as well as the young keeper Lafont. And in that, I think you have a really fantastic starting 11 to go with the midfielders Blin and Bodiger. And it's a team that's a little bit younger, but also has the right amount of experience in players like Mubanje, Trejo, and Braithwaite to provide some guidance when necessary. And you've got some exciting younger players to come off the bench as well. So I think that this team has a belief in themselves that Pascal Duprat is driving on, and I think that now that he's finally got tactics settled out, I think that this team can really continue to push for Europe. I think that it would have been easy to make excuses after going behind to Monaco on Friday, and the fact that they didn't, I think, for me, really cements that immediate response. I mean, they were knocking at Monaco's goal. Subasic made a couple good saves, I think, within 10 minutes of having gone behind, and that to me says more about this team's potential than the number of goals that Braithwaite scores or the quality of the saves that Lafont makes, because those are instances that, while they do bode well for the future of the team, need to be taken in isolation with a grain of salt. But that psychological resiliency to battle back is what really impresses me, and I think that's what's going to drive Toulouse and can make them a dark horse for the Champions League or Europa League.
Yeah, and that's the strange thing in these kind of games. Sometimes when you see a result like this, you think maybe this smaller side has nicked a couple, maybe it's been a bit lucky, but they were really battering on the door and creating chances that last season they would have never created that amount of chances. And it's such a night and day sort of picture for a football team that haven't had an enormous amount of upheaval, really. Obviously, they've lost Ben Yedder, but you've mentioned him briefly already, Tom, but Martin Braithwaite, he's captain now as well. He's second top scorer in Ligue 1, just behind Edinson Cavani with 6. He's a real inspiration, although he still misses a couple of chances. He likes to have a couple of misses before he grabs the goal. But again, with a brace at the weekend, he was excellent again.
Yeah, I think it's almost similar to what's going on with Cavani at PSG. He was in the shadow of another striker, obviously with Cavani being Ibra. But now that striker's gone, it's their chance to step into the limelight, and the pair of them do like a miss or 4 in a game before they finally score. But with Braithwaite being the captain, he looks like he's the driving force of this team. He's the first line of defence, if you will. But everyone seems to be behind them, and there's such a team spirit. And this past season that's just gone, it shows that with the right amount of team spirit, anything can happen. So he's on top form. Hopefully he continues it. At the moment, he's showing those signs of slowing down, and with the fixtures they've got coming up, he's probably going to add more to his tally. But he looks like he's really coming to another level this season with the captaincy and being the main focal point.
Yeah, and he's a real energizer bunny. He seems to be running around everywhere. But let's talk about Duprat again, and Eric. It's not something we necessarily expected, but that ever since that that speech before the game in the final game of the season last season, he's really inspired this side. And like you mentioned, they've even changed up tactically, and they've still got it right. Is he just the magic man at the moment?
Yeah, I think what it is he's got that settled first choice 11, and he's finally being given a higher quality of players. I mean, he had, I think, a decent run at Evian given the circumstances there, keeping the team up for a couple of seasons, and being perhaps unfairly dismissed in 2015. But now that he's got this good combination of young players and experienced players, I think that his motivational tactics and his tactical nous and his willingness to continue giving chances to these players that, again, feeling sorry for Ari Bajé, who had given a lot of these players their first chances, he's continued to put faith in this team and also boosted their confidence by now appearing to have what is a settled first choice 11. He's a fiery character, but I think that 11, I think, is really, really what settles it. Because so often we see these players being given a chance, taken out, put in, taken out, and I think that tends to really rattle them. I know that younger players can sometimes come in the case of injury, but for Toulouse to have these younger players who know that week in, week out, you can make a mistake. It's a job, perhaps unnecessary booking near the end of the match on Friday evening. But, provided he's not suspended, I don't know what his yellow card count for the season is. Will he start the next match alongside Julian? Yes, because he's demonstrated now over the course of this season and sparingly last season as well that he's earned his manager's trust, and he can continue to be, for example, a building block of this team. And with that continuing to be the case, again, there's no reason Toulouse can't continue to keep this up, especially given the issues that seem to be surrounding the likes of perhaps a more highly regarded team such as a Lyon, a Saint-Etienne, or a Rennes at this point in time.
Yeah, and they sit in a really nice position. But let's briefly touch on Monaco as well. And Tom, is this a case of them having one eye on the Champions League and maybe missing the mark against a team that has proven that they can catch teams out when they're not fully focused?
I think that's fully it. I mean, they made such a good start to their Champions League campaign, beating Spurs, and I think that probably galvanised them. And they looked at each other and went, "We can do something. We can get out of this group." I think they've concentrated on that, and in some games, this one is a good example. They should really, on paper, be at least drawing. They should be winning, but they probably had an eye on this week's round of fixtures, and it was against the wrong team this week, unfortunately for them, because Toulouse caught them out, and they've gone home empty-handed. I think Monaco will have a tough job of balancing, retaining a Champions League place in Ligue 1, while also doing well in the competition itself. They stand a good chance of getting out of the group, but if it all fails and they mess it up and they don't qualify for the next round, then they've got to really focus on getting into the Champions League places domestically, and who knows, by the time the group stage is out, it might be a bit too much for them.
Yeah, and Eric, it was a squad that wasn't necessarily as weak as they've put out in Ligue 1, which is probably a credit to Toulouse, but are they going to struggle to balance between the Champions League and battling for Ligue 1, because they've already allowed PSG back into the advantage that they'd gained on them previously?
No, I don't think so. I think that Leonardo Jardim recognizes that. I don't know if either of you have seen this, but the mysterious suspension of CSKA's Roman Eremenko. He's their number 10 Finnish playmaker, leading scorer this season. He's been suspended for a month by UEFA. Nobody's really sure what for. There's a rumor that it's because of his use of snus, the Swedish tobacco substitute. So a really bizarre situation. But the point there is that against the CSKA side, lacking their most potent scorer, Jardim knows that 3 points is absolutely imperative here. He similarly benefited from absences against the likes of Villarreal and Fenerbahce in the playoff rounds, and he knows that putting this team on 7 points with 3 matches played is going to put Monaco in a great position to qualify. So it's not anything disrespectful to lose to not start the likes of Lamar Bakayoko, but what it is it's a realization that this Monaco team is talented enough to make real noise in the Champions League, and that his priorities necessarily should be in perhaps taking a flyer against, again, a strong Toulouse team to privilege or getting a result away in Moscow tomorrow evening.
And it's strange to think that the big decision in that game just before Toulouse went in front, that he took on Germain for Bakayoko and tried to possibly hold on to that draw, but it didn't quite work out the way they wanted to. But a team that aren't sitting so pretty as Toulouse is Olympique Lyonnais. They were humbled in a tempestuous 2-0 loss at Nice on Friday evening in the slightly later game. Eric, what is going wrong at Parc OL at the moment?
I don't honestly know that anything is potentially going wrong. Fekir made an impetuous challenge. He's a fiery player. He plays with his heart on his sleeve, and it doesn't always necessarily manifest itself in a physical way. But this is a team that has between the absences of Fekir, Lacazette, Cornet, Raphael, gone along suspension. Has been missing a lot of key players and hasn't really had a chance to click the way it should. If we look at how Lyon started the season, that is after the Trophée des Champions lost to PSG, and they looked really imperious. And I think as this team gets back to fitness, they'll look it back to. I think it really is just merely an issue of injuries. Once Cornet returns, I would like to see the team potentially go back to a 4-3-3. Do have a few questions about the 3-5-2, even though it does seem to privilege the likes of Rebus and Raphael and being able to get forward from the wings. But I think that playing a 4-3-3 with Cornet on the left, Fekir on the right, and Lacazette essentially will do more to stretch defenses. I mean, that's really my issue with the formation at the time being. But yeah, I think give this team another month to get everybody fit and fighting, and I don't think you'll see this be an issue as well. Clément Grenier played this weekend with Lyon's B team, so he'll be back to fitness as well soon. I know he's been a peripheral figure for much of the last 2 seasons, but is still a talented player as well. So yeah, I think that there's also positives to be taken from the emergence of some of these younger players. I'm thinking particularly the likes of Lucas Toussaint, who did very well to replace Gonalons during the captain's suspension. And Emmanuel Mamana really does look quite the prospect. He seems to be, so thus far, especially given his age and position, justifying the fee that Lyon paid for him in the offseason.
Yeah, and Eric's mentioned perfectly that there's a few injury worries at the moment for the likes of Maxwell Cornet and Alexandre Lacazette was brought on instead of started because of recent injury troubles. I'm probably with an eye on that game against Juventus in midweek. But Tom, is their attack lacking a potency? I know they're missing 2 relatively big players to that fact, but is that showing the lack of depth they have in the attacking areas?
Oh yeah, I mean, like you say, missing 2 players as big as they are, it's obviously going to show signs of not quite being there. But are they being made to pay for not bringing in another striker in the summer? Potentially, but when that other striker was Emmanuel Adebayor, maybe not. But I think that it's being shown that they really do miss Lacazette. I'm not too sure if he's fully fit for the game against Juve, but if he is, that will give them a massive boost. If he's not, they will struggle simply because they've got it's a big gap to fill and big boots to fill as well.
And that, like we mentioned this on the preview show that it would be tricky whether to start him for this one or the Juve game. But is he fully fit for that Juve game? It's going to be the real question. But Eric, I know it might be a little bit early to say, but Lyon have lost 4 games this season in the league. They've lost 3 out of their last 4 in all competitions and face a tricky task against Juventus, even at home. If they lose that one and look like falling out of the Champions League as well, if they don't get a positive result against Guingamp, is Bruno Genesio under some pressure?
Again, I really don't think so. I think he has made a couple of missteps this season, particularly playing Jordi Gaspar right wing back. He's looked horrendous in both on Friday and against Sevilla in the Champions League. But I would have opted for Olivier Cayman there myself. But other than that, I don't think he's gotten anything wrong. He's made the best of what he can with an injury bit team, and the results that he has gotten have looked decent enough. An experimental system came off well against Dinamo Zagreb. His decision to play Corentin Tolisso at right back, I think, should be repeated on come tomorrow evening if he wants to get success. I think the team looked much more balanced against Saint-Etienne with that being the case. And I think that Genesio's inventiveness and willingness to integrate these young players into the team in an appropriate way, I'm thinking particularly the likes of Cornet and Mamana, is to be lauded. And he's the kind of manager who, I think, following the footsteps of the likes of Remy Gard, has taken what it could potentially be a very tough situation for Lyon and really made the best of it and got a lot of good things out of this team to his credit. I think that the dismissal of Fournier aside, Lyon have not really historically had a quick trigger on managers such as it was, and that the Champions League, again, this is a tough group. But even that being said, Lyon are far from out of it. If they can get, again, perhaps at a long shot, they can get a point out of one of these two matches with Juventus, I would think they would progress were they to beat Sevilla in the return leg, and likewise Dinamo Zagreb. So the team can only hope to build from here, and I think that with a full squad, they do have a fighting chance of doing that.
Clutch at the straws you can keep. Let's talk very briefly about Nice, Tom, and they have 20 points now at this point of the season. There has been no club has been lower than second after having that many points at this time of the season. Are they title contenders now?
You have to say yes, simply because of the start they've made, and that fact you just said there. They've really struck gold this season. The appointment of Favre is a masterstroke. That's the only way I can put it. He's used Balotelli perfectly. He hasn't relied on him, but he's used him when necessary. But apart from Balotelli, because he's the one that will get all the headlines, he's the big name, the team around them is playing fantastically well. They've got such a solid team. And yeah, you'd have to say they are title challengers, because with some of the bigger clubs like Monaco and Paris slipping up, it's given the chance for another team to take advantage. Nice have done that. They've grabbed this opportunity by both hands, and they've really driven home the fact that they're here to stay. I think if they're in the top three going into the winter break, yeah, and obviously they're within distance of first, yeah, I'd say they're title challengers.
And just briefly mentioning Eric, it was one of their slightly older heads, shall we say, that was the real inspiration in this one. I thought Jean-Michel Seri had a really excellent game, and he's an important part to this squad and their success so far, isn't he?
Oh yeah, I think that the Ivorian, having having Remy Walter alongside him makes all the difference in the world. He'd been Seri in this 3-5-2 had been at times, I think, unfairly tasked. I'm thinking about the match against Krasnodar, if I recall the starting 11s correctly. Had been unfairly tasked with playing a defensive midfield role, and that's not something that, due to his size and his natural talent and natural abilities, he's really cut out to do. But with Remy Walter alongside him to play as a defined defensive midfielder, even at the expense of Vincent Coziello, I think that this makes Nice a much more complete team, to have someone who's a specialist defensive midfielder in there, and that really freed Seri to join play and be the sort of attacking linchpin that he was for so much of last season, when he was, I think, especially in the first half of last season, really one of the best central midfielders in Liga.
Yeah, and adding someone like Willan Cyprien, who can kind of play a hybrid of defensive midfield and attacking midfield, depending on where they need him at the moment. It is a really interesting team that's starting to have a little bit more depth than many people maybe have expected. But if Balotelli could have stuck that penalty away, it might have been even sweeter. But a team that are probably fighting at the wrong end of the table after a much-needed win before the international break, albeit a fortuitous one, Lille have sunk back into the drop zone with a 1-0 loss at Guingamp. They continue to struggle in front of goal as they have for the past few seasons, but they are now they're now leaky at the back, where they was their real measure of strength in the past. Tom, what's really going wrong here for Lille? Is there any way out of the tunnel for them?
I think there has to be. I mean, they ended last season fairly well. I mean, they got out of a similar situation. They were struggling. They were struggling then, but I personally certainly didn't expect this to happen. I think defensively they've been poor. I think it's a bit of an understatement, but they've not got a striker or a goal threat that can pull them out of it. Yes, Adair's there, and he won the Euros with Portugal this summer, but he's not known for being an out-and-out goal scorer. But if they can remain in safe area, safe zone, if that's the right way to put it, until the January transfer window, and they can bring in someone that's got a goal scoring head on them, then obviously a couple of defenders, I think they might just be all right, but that's a long shot at this stage.
And I mentioned in my intro there, Eric, that defense is something we've come to attribute of being the real strength and positive point of Lille, but they've been, to say poor is maybe being a little bit kind, because they've conceded 15 so far this season, which is only bettered by 3 other teams, that Metz, Caen, and Dijon, and Metz, Caen, Montpellier, who all have been hammered in one game. So what's gone wrong here? I mean, Antonetti had the pieces of a defence that was one of the better ones in Ligue 1, but even the goal at the weekend was such a simple goal for them to concede.
I agree. But, I mean, this is the thing. 15 goals in 9 matches is less than ideal. But it could be better. I'll agree with that. I think that Youssouf Sankharé needs to play a bit more midfield to be a more mobile and effective screen of that back two. Of that center back pairing. I think that I would agree with Savelli being a regular starter, but he's not the fastest, and likewise Basha alongside him. I know Basha didn't play at the weekend, but there's an issue here that stems from Antonetti's lack of tactical nous, and it's apparent in the defense, but it's also apparent in the way that he seems to lack a structure in his attack. He's, again, the absences of Ronnie Lopez and Eric Botiak and Ryan Mendes certainly had an effect on this match, but you have Nico de Preville on the bench, and he doesn't come on. Morgan Amalfitano comes on, Yassine Benzia comes on, but your marquee offseason signing, if you discount Eder, who'd already been with the team on loan, isn't brought on. It's just a bit bizarre, not only in terms of personnel, but in terms of what he's trying to do with this 4-3-3. So in a 4-3-3, we have Lille playing with Yves Bissouma on the right, a youngster who has had a decent showing in his first few matches with the team, but Eder centrally and Naim Sliti on the left. But what ended up happening in practice in this match was frankly disturbing, and I know that's a bit of a strong description, but all of the attacking plays seem to go through Bissouma, who is, an intriguing prospect, but not ready to handle that load. Whereas on the left, and essentially Sliti and Eder continued to switch. Sliti would pop up in the middle, Eder on the flank, vice versa. And through a lack of occupying consistent positions, Lille were unable to get possession at all close to the goal, and they were reduced to what they continually have been doing, is taking shots from range. It was Sliti on the night. In the past, it's been Lopez, Botiak, de Preville, Benzia. There's not a coherent attacking plan in place, either tactically, in terms of player positions, in terms of personnel, that makes any sense in terms of building constructive, aesthetically pleasing, successful attacking play. And Antonetti is totally lost tactically. And that's the frustrating thing, because he does have the personnel. All right, if I'm Frédéric Antonetti, I'm going to play a 4-2-3-1. I'm going to play Youssouf Sankharé and Ibrahim Amadou in midfield. I'm going to play Ronnie Lopez centrally, Bissouma on the right, de Preville on the left, Eder up top. That's a team that can get something done. When these players are back fit and fighting, Anthony needs to put that forward and needs to go with that approach. Have Eder play as a striker, not this drifting, jinky wide player. The guy's 6'2". He's got a decent ability to link play, but not if he's having to drift out on the left to get space for Naim Sliti. I agree, Sliti's an intriguing prospect, had a decent season with Red Star, but it's not effective for this team. Sliti can come off the bench to be an impact substitution, but why he stays on the pitch for 90 minutes when you've got a proven Ligue 1 quality player, Nico de Preville, on the bench in that position makes absolutely no sense to me. So rant over, but I think that Antonetti is really, really missing the boat, particularly in attack. The defense is good enough, particularly when Basha's fit once again.
Well, the rant's going to continue slightly because I'm going to join in again. I've ranted on Lille before, but you've mentioned one there. Nicolas de Preville doesn't come on for this entire game. This is a man who scored 6 goals and had 9 assists for relegated Reims last season, who had Gaetan Charbonnier up front, who is about as mobile as my granddad after Christmas dinner. It's frankly astonishing that this team can't score and can't defend anymore. It's been an issue for 2-3 years, would you say, Eric, that Lille have been so poor attackingly and have looked devoid of ideas, and they've never really been a prolific team, but they've lost their defensive flooring, and that means everything's falling out from underneath them at the moment. And Yama can't save them every week. I mean, they were bad against Nancy, but they got lucky for a goal that shouldn't have been offside, and then they win a game 1-0 through, and again, a lucky goal. And that's, I think, probably saved Antonetti's job at this moment in time, because without that win, they're on 4 points. They have 1 win all season, and they're bottom of the table. There's no excuses really for me. I think that I can't believe Lille are carrying on with this charade of having him as a manager anymore. They don't have any easier really games coming up. Looking at this, they have Bastia at the weekend at home. If they can't beat Bastia at home, who aren't the greatest travelling side in history, have not been too bad away from home, but they've got to get points from somewhere, because after that it's Paris Saint-Germain, who they should automatically lose against, unfortunately. Then they've got Angers, who are in great form. They've got Lyon, who should be strong enough to have their strikers back by that point in mid-November after another international break. So, Tom, can you see a justification for keeping Antonetti on, or is he really on the teetering on the edge at the moment?
Well, after listening to 2 very impressive rants, I feel threatened for him. No, you both make very good points. He had the foundations last season towards the end, defensively, really, really sound. And coming into this season, it's been a completely different team. Like you say, they nick a 1-0, otherwise they're bottom of the table on 4 points. That alone is bad enough, but the performances have been dire. And I think you're right. It's hard to defend him. The only thing that might keep him in the job is whether they feel there's someone out there that's suitable to replace him at the moment. I think that's probably the only thing that's potentially keeping him in a job at the moment.
It's frankly astonishing, really, and yeah, he's in hot water, shall we say? But just to sort of briefly touch on something that's going on at Lille, there's a press release the other day that they've entered exclusive talks with former F1 Lotus owner Gerard Lopez, who had discussions with Marseille previously before Frank McCourt agreed a deal with the Louis Dreyfus company. So could that maybe help them out a little bit, Eric? I know they've not really bought many players in the recent past. They've sold a few for big money, but not really had the returns. Could a big money takeover maybe push them in the right direction, or at least push Antonetti out of the door?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Lille's academy and scouting structure has always been really sound. We look at the profits they made even just in the recent past on the likes of Serhou Guirassy, Benjamin Pavard. They made a profit on CDB. They'll likely make one on Corsia. Adama Traore. There's really a good structure in place at this club, and a bit more money that would allow them to operate at a slightly higher level of quality, I think can really make a difference for this team. Bissouma looks a great prospect, and that's another good example of how Lille are forging connections in Africa. And I think there's a lot to be said for the foundation that's in place of this team. With more solid financial backing to. And this is the thing. The real obstacle to Lille's financial situation is the contract with the Stade Pierre Mauroy. I believe that they're owed something to the tune of 7.5-8 million euros to the city of Lille every year as part of their contribution for using the stadium. And it's very, very hard for the club to cover that payment without having to continue to sell players. And that is what drove. I mean, Buffal was always going to be sold, given the season he had last year. But to see promising younger players who really, you wish they would have had another season at the club. The likes of Guirassy, who was very impressive for Auxerre on loan last season, for Benjamin Pavard, who's been fantastic for Les Espoirs, and when he did play for Lille as well, I think showed real signs of promise, especially at the age of just 20. To have players of that potential sold on, Adama Traore is another example, his sale to Monaco, and that's a frustrating situation. And not those younger players not having the opportunity to blossom and to grow and to develop in Lille, as we have with younger players in the recent past. I'm thinking again of the likes of Debuchy, Cabaye, Stefan Lichtsteiner. Going back a little bit further, those players were allowed to reach a higher level of maturity and a higher level of play during their time at Lille without having to be sold on. The club weren't as under the gun. So, well, yes, it's fantastic that Lille now have a world-class stadium. I mean, it's a fantastic ground that I think is well done. But the fact of the matter is that's been sort of an albatross under Michel Seydou's ownership, and they're continually forced to turn players. And what would this team look like? I mean, I'm not saying they would have been able to keep Eden Hazard, but were this team have been able to keep, say, the likes of Guirassy, Pavard, and Simon Kjaer, then what sort of team would this look like? I think we'd be looking at a much more impressive team, and one that would continue to be a European contender as they have been in the recent past.
Yeah, and you think as well of players like Origi and Boufal, who they've signed from other clubs at a very tender young age, and then pushing them onto that next level and getting a great profit out of them. There's a real base there that if Gerard Lopez invests wisely, gets that stadium sorted, gets them all under that one banner where they can possibly either keep these players, or when they sell these players for big money, they can reinvest it in the squad. It might be a really interesting time for Lille if he provides the promises that he might have done at Marseille, or heaven forbid if he maybe tries to bring El Loco back if he's had discussions with him in the past. But that's all we have time for this week. My thanks to Mo, Eric and Tom for joining me and everyone listening at home this evening. Tune into our preview show hosted by Eric on Thursday, and we will see you at the same time, same place next week. A bientôt and goodbye.